You didn't have your-
There we go. He's doing good. I have like regular coffee. Because you're like, oh, you want to rest? We'll have like, have this awesome recording. Another one after that. No.
I got.
That's how you're doing me. I'm like,
Yes.
Our favorite piece of the puzzle. Screen that stuff.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much. All right, I think we're up and running. Good evening, and thank you for everybody being here. Appreciate it. And the agenda I sent yesterday to this group and put a segment on there to finalize because there may be other things when I get greedy working an agenda that you may want to put them in there. And so I had for us to be able to look at some tentative agreements for consideration, do some article responses, and when we look at future bargaining dates, May 20th was set up as the second budget committee meeting. It is, I mean, and it's late, so we may not be able to do this, but it was really opening that back up to be able to say, is May 20th a viable date, and do we want to meet? And we don't need to decide that right now, but it was on the table that we could take a look at. You have other items or things or?
No, we have our response proposal to go through on the agenda. That part makes sense. I think that if we have unopened articles or others that are agreement to look for TAs, that part of the agenda worked as well.
Okay, and what I did was I took those articles that I think they're the ones that are here. There might be one that had a simple change in it, are all those that neither one of us addressed when we opened. And so they were totally left untouched. And so let's see. And I've got all of those if we want to take a look at that. Eric, can you slide those around, please? Send one Crystal's way and see if you need more or what we're looking at. Yep, Alice, here's for Alice.
I think we've got it. Yeah, I think.
Oh, okay,
That's perfect.
then I'll take that one back, please. Thank you. All right. Um, so Article 3, non-discrimination, we had, nothing opened up.
That looks good.
Okay. Nicole, what I'll do is sign these and then, shift them your way. Perfect.
I can be a page.
Oh, thank you. And Article 4 was the grievance procedure, which was another that we didn't have opened up at all. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Article 5 is the complaint procedure.
Good.
Seven is separability.
Yep. Good.
We say that for the new ones who come to
Yes.
market.
Right.
There you go.
But
Um,
it's not Hazen, I swear.
No,
Yeah.
no.
9 is assignments.
I was in the car driving back and forth to Gonzaga yesterday, so I want to be on my feet as much as I can.
Very good.
That was good.
Thanks, sir. 10 is association rights and privileges. And you can make sure I didn't sneak anything in there.
You want to start giving release time in Nicole? Yep. Good.
And then 14 is personnel file.
That's good.
21 is personal freedom.
Good.
22 is individual contracts.
Yeah, good.
23 is criticism.
Good.
24 is employee discipline.
Yep, that's good.
25 is association dues. And 6 is classroom enrollment. Excuse me.
This is actually one that I think we should, look at, not that we've opened, but that there's an error in
Okay,
reference to Article 27.
okay,
Article 27 is option.
yep,
Yeah,
Okay.
we have a unnoticed error there from the past.
okay. So I'll take this one back and we'll work on that one. 27 is the next one. Which is job sharing.
Yeah, that one's good.
And I added 30 labor management committee that somehow got lost in my file.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, thank you.
We should pull 26 out.
Yeah, I kept 26 out of there.
Referring to a timeline. That I guess is either the timeline.
Okay. Well, what was Article?
See your transfers.
Okay,
And the only place you have timeline, you outlined is the grievance article. Why don't we check?
okay, well,
Look at that.
we'll table that and come back around, but that's a good chunk. To go ahead and get approved, so thank you, appreciate that a lot. And then I'll get copies to you, so you have those as well. And then we've got article responses as well as you, so whatever your pleasure is, we'll start in.
You wanna go ahead and go?
Sure, we can go. Eric, I'm gonna do the same, please. Thank you.
Think it's supposed to say all references to timelines. I think it's supposed to be self-referring. I think it's referring to its own article and we changed the article number possibly, because the timelines are actually included within it. So that makes me wonder if at some point we just changed the article number and didn't notice.
Yeah, that could be, I can go and check we have all the old historical
Yeah,
contracts, so I can go back and take a look at that.
I have a feeling that that's.
Yeah, I
likely
figured
what
that article
happened.
numbers changed somewhere. And that was just the way that it came together, so.
Yeah, the timeline is within article itself.
Okay, good catch. Right. The articles that we put forward that you didn't touch, I didn't make copies of any of those, because was pretty straightforward. But we looked at Article 8, staff evaluations, and there were a couple of things. We asked for a change of status. The only piece that I put in green at the bottom on that was we want to ensure alignment with the licensed educator evaluation handbook. So we want to make sure that whatever is listed here also becomes a part of that book, so that we're not operating on different, what's the word I'm looking for? We're not operating on two different sets of information. So, no, that's okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, so just wanting to make sure that we were clear on that. So that's
That's just a follow-up to your previous.
That's a
proposal.
follow-up, and I just put the
Yeah.
note on the bottom of it that as we started to take a look at,
Sorry, I was not following.
Yeah.
it
I was like, we
at all.
didn't propose the change.
Okay, it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
sorry.
Yes, so,
Yeah, if we started to
Sorry,
look
lost
through,
us for
because
last
there,
few
there,
minutes.
there have been, I can think of an issue during my 5-year tenure where there was a piece of information that I'm not sure if it was in the handbook or in the policy, or if we were making it up. But it's kind of like, it was just the note to myself to be able to say, we gotta make sure that the two line up.
Yeah.
That's all.
And we have that in our packet too. We brought back a response on Article 8. so we can
Okay,
talk more
and that's
about
kind of what I figured. We just wanted to make sure notes got in there too, as a matter of course.
okay.
Article 12. If you look at the back page, with some of the information, we had already added employees may be required to participate in no more than 3 unpaid evening activities, that we would make determination of early, all those kinds of things. We did add, because the conversation says the school workday shall not exceed 8 hours, which we get and like that. So the add was, apart from providing required preparation period, lunch, and break, the time may be utilized for student contact, school or district meetings, communication with parents and students, and or class preparation. So what it does is it says, if we've got the 8 hours, what fits into those 8 hours, in terms of how things look at. When we get down to the piece about in E about extended contracts and the outdoor school, we had some conversation today about the maximum of 30 hours. And we know that we have at least one person pretty much every year that has an additional 6 hours because they agree to do the outside wilderness survival. I'm going to sleep outside overnight with students and have supervisory responsibilities. And so instead of just capping it at the 30 hours, we said for up to a maximum of 30 hours, any additional hours must have prior approval from school administrator. And so it was just being able to keep that 30, but also to acknowledge that there may be an instance or two where for a very needed reason, somebody's going to have a little bit more time. That's all.
That helps. I think we were curious about where the additional stuff was coming from on that one. So that helped answer that question.
Good,
So-
okay. When we get over to what you had added in that second page, my note says further conversation with and data from our student services director. And so we left pretty much everything of what you had put forward in there, but we know we need to have more conversation to be able to take a look at that. Let me find my other too many piles of paper.
And we're just put like 2 of them. Could be that way, so.
We're looking at. So I know I need to talk to Kelsey further, or I want to about this. One of the things that we did do was we moved number 4 to number 1. And said, the district acknowledges the significant role special education case manager play in developing and implementing IEPs and is committed to ensuring so on and so forth. And we thought, boy, if that should be number 1 instead of number 4, that should drive everything that we make our decisions about, instead of having it buried in number 4, to just be able to make that first. A couple of things that we have thought about is it about the things that I know that we need to get answered are things like, to the right page. At least 2 workdays prior notice to any scheduled IEP meeting. Most of the time, could be relatively okay, but there are times when we don't have that wait. We can't. If a parent calls an IEP meeting or we get a move-in or something like that, it's not always possible. And I'm just saying these things to know that there's further conversation I've got to have with Kelsey. Maximum number of IEPs per day, maximum number of IEPs per week. I really want to take a look at, if we hold IEP meetings to 3 a week, can we do it? Is there enough horsepower to make that happen? And get through all the meetings we need to have? And that I just don't know. And so there's questions I want to be able to have conversation with Kelsey about before we kind of come back and really land on pieces of this.
One question I had, and recognizing the intense work it takes to prepare, like, but even today at my school, we had twins where we had back-to-back IEP
Mhm.
meetings. And so how do we not have language that boxes in something that actually is good for everyone in those situations? Or when a special ed teacher has said, can we get a sub for me and a sub for the teacher and do 2 when we're kind of already have to bring in a sub for 4 hours? And what we've done at PES is sometimes even had 2 different case managers and kind of team up. We call them IEP paloozas. And so where we have a couple, but that's also been something that's not been like in my experience, at least last year, this year, where it's been directed, but it's been something where we work together to say, hey, we're kind of behind. Does this make sense for maybe less complex annual reviews that we had? So just something that we kind of like, how can we achieve some, and so that was just one thing that came to my mind is thinking about that, like where, where's the wiggle room to maybe work together with our case
Mhm.
managers around some flexibility? Is there language that will allow for that? That makes sense.
It does. And we're also concerned about the overload of our SPED teams and the out of meetings and the late notices. And so
Totally,
that's where
totally.
we're coming from with that.
Okay, 13 was maintenance of classroom control and discipline. In B, the written student discipline procedure shall specify that, specify that circumstances under which an administrator or designee may remove a student from the classroom, including those involving, and we changed disruptive to unsafe behavior. Semantics, but it's really sometimes disruptive is not necessarily unsafe. We had the incident or the conversation about, I may have a student with high levels of autism that paces in the back of my classroom. It might be somewhat disruptive, but is it unsafe? And so it's kind of like, how do we, it was just a suggestion. In C, we took out synergy and put student information system. God forbid that we don't change that every 3 years, but we wanted to be able to recognize that. Under F, the proposal was individualized discipline or behavioral plans that include potential physical intervention. Licensed employees will be given training and practice in the use of any physical intervention tactics that are identified in the behavior discipline plan prior to the student's entry into the classroom. We can't deny a student access to school while we do 3 weeks or 2 weeks of CPI training or anything else like that. Can we beef up who's in the classroom and maybe be able to find support in other ways, but we can't deny a student access to school. So that was the reason for that piece of the puzzle. And then our last one on there was what we brought forward last time. And my guess is you have it also. I was just wondering how that should read. If it still is in the policy, if we're just using the district will adhere to guidelines within current Oregon revised statutes, period, or if all the rest of these need to remain in there. So that's strictly a visual setup. I did put a note on the bottom of this one that also is in recognition of Article 31 with a possible consideration of an MOU for a study about student behavior that takes into account this as well as Article 31. As a possibility, in terms of being able to really get to the meat of where we need to be and that we're looking at. Article 16, paid leaves. Hello. When we looked at today, we were going through things and our struggle was that the ad that we put in here, and the reason I printed it out was the H, a partial day leave. And it said, when an employee requests reasonable access to leave for less than half a day, the employee may take such leave without a deduction in their available leave hours if they can arrange coverage. And it's getting tight in terms of arranging coverage. especially for that long a day. The other thing that is not common, but, has been a practice on occasion is I don't need anybody to cover for me Friday afternoon, but I can have a half day without taking leave. And so sayonara, I'm gonna be gone on Friday afternoon and my responsibilities are covered. So I'm just gonna go home and not have to take leave on that Friday. So what we did is we said, let's make it a reasonable place of a class period or an hour, instead of that half day. And so it's just trimming down to be able to make that more reasonable for, I've got to drop the dog off at the vet. I'll be in, I need to go over to the middle school to watch the honor roll assembly. I need, those kinds of things that we can, allow those things to happen.
I just caught something that might need to be added as a consideration on the first page, which is no more than 10% of the staff for Blodgett and Clemens. Should the academy also be in consideration on there, considering how small their staff pool is? What page are you on?
This
Sorry,
is
on
the first page of Article 16.
16.
It's B2.
BB2.
Oh, BB2.
B1, B2.
So, yeah, I think that can be a consideration of do we add PA to that?
I didn't pick up on that before, so. I'm assuming that that is the reason, is that they have a smaller.
Okay.
So
Yep.
Susan, can I ask you again on a question, a follow-up question
Yeah.
on the partial day?
Yep.
You said that it's getting tight for coverage, even though when staff does that, they typically they get their own teachers to cover that.
Right.
So is the main concern the Fridays?
One of them is the Fridays. The other thing that we talked about was it says such arrangements require prior approval from the building administrator or his designee. And it's kind of like, they just do it. Nobody ever says anything. And so I think there's some misunderstanding.
Who just does? Who does
That,
it?
that the teachers make arrangements with their other person. And so if we keep it that way, then we either need to make the such arrangements require prior approval or take that sentence out.
And this is coming from building principals that are saying that they're just doing this
That there are times when teachers will make arrangements
and not communicate
and not
with the front
communicate,
office.
not communicate with principal or office about what they're doing.
Okay.
But we're open to conversation, definitely.
And that would be another location that striking the gender, which would be helpful. Because we're both of them. I'm sorry, under each. The
It would be
spit
or their
sentence to just
designee
there or just strike his or
or
her.
designee.
Oh, I see. I just couldn't get my eyes put on that.
There's a lot of words on every page.
Article 17. Oh, I put at the end of that, the only thing that's different about 17 was there was conversation about where and do we include the sick leave MOU? That was something that your group brought forward last time. And my wondering is this the place? If that's something that you want to do, and just as a, and I don't know if people know what that MOU was.
I don't think so.
The MOU was really set to be able to look at someone who, in the licensed group, we don't have a sick leave bank, but it was somebody who needed some time. And so we established an MOU at that point specific to that person to be able to say, Jennifer put a sheet together to give to Nicole where people could say in the license group, yes, I will give. There were limits to hours and stuff
Yeah.
like that, to be able to help this person out. And we would do it, kind of on a person case by case. There was another individual that needed that support or we
Mhm.
thought was gonna need that support.
Yeah.
And so we opened that up to be able to say, yes, it will be inclusive of another individual. And so the request, if I get it right, from PEA was, can we make this a part of our collective bargaining agreement rather than just an MOU that doesn't open up an overall total sick leave bank, but it opens up some opportunity and need for that level of support to be able to happen. And so the only thing was, is if we want to look at that, we can look at that, but this was just the placeholder to say, is this where it needs to go or not?
Okay.
Article 18, insurance. We agreed to your 1,300 in 25-26 and your $1,400 cap in 26-27. We have kept the insurance pool at $65,000. And the, under J, if the teacher opts out of medical coverage, the district's contribution in excess of a single employee's actual coverage premium shall be distributed, and it was 300, you proposed 400, we're coming back with 350. So that's insurance. We went back and forth a lot about compensation to be able to say, do we put forward a percentage or do we not? And we chose to put forward a percentage with some things we don't know. The state forecasts of the governor's budget doesn't happen until Wednesday. We don't know that. We don't know about the local option levy equalization. Thank you. Always forget that. And so there are a few things that we don't know. There are also a few things that we're watching for in terms of bills. Will they change the special education cap? And they're talking about eliminating the cap. Or will they put it at 15%, which was another piece of the conversation? Will there be more money that comes to the state for high cost disability? That there's just things we don't know. And most specifically, we're not going to know till later this week about the governor's budget. And so what we put forward for 25-26, and I'm going to hit another piece of information when we talk about the last article. Because we're also looking at costs of what things we want and how much that's going to cost and where do we run with it. So our initial proposal is a 3% in a first year, a 3.25 in a second year. Under number 7, the co-curricular schedule, the note is that athletics and activities salaries are much lower than comparable districts. And so we chose to leave that at 6% so that we could equalize our coaches to a place that made more sense. In number 8, we made a change to be able to look at what the process is. It did say proper verification and notifying the superintendent. And we just said, you got to complete the salary schedule column advancement form for pre-approval. And then you put forward your information to be able to move on to advancement. And so that's really language more than anything else. We declined the bachelor's plus 30 for dual degree and put in what the requirements are for salary schedule placement within that as well. Then the licensed staff who obtain or retain national board certification, we talked about receiving a stipend as opposed to advancing one column. Simply because, I mean, we were just throwing around ideas. If somebody doesn't have a column to advance, then it's a little bit of a problem. But we were curious about, is this something that a lot of people are talking about doing? Or, not that we want to cut it out, but it's kind of like just a curiosity of where did it come from? And we can take a look at what the potential costs could be around that in calculating. So it was just a point of curiosity about why national board certification.
And then another thing that I had raised as a concern on that is, it's not a permanent certification, so you do have to keep a certain number of hours and keep that certification. What I would hate to see is somebody losing that certification and then getting bumped back down a column, like. that made me feel very uneasy to think
Yeah, it's a
about.
rigorous process.
It is a
So,
very
yes,
rigorous
and-
process.
and
Yeah, and that was the other thing that we talked about is if you did a stipend, is it annual? Is it one time? Is it cost of licensure? Is it some support for the program itself? I mean, it was just, there were more unanswered than answered questions about what that could be. But the other part of it is we start to factor in potential cost or information for considerations. Are we talking about a handful of people, or are we talking about 45 people ready to go after I'm being national board certification, just so there's an idea that we can kind of put in our decision making. So,
I think currently it's a handful of people, but I think we always want to encourage people to, rigorously advance and educate themselves.
absolutely agree.
So I think board certification is exciting to teachers. I think that it encourages intensive growth and development. So we just wanted to encourage that and reward those who go through the process because it is quite rigorous.
It is.
If someone decided it wasn't worth the work and let it go, that would be a personal decision that they made.
Yeah, and would be the thing of do they actually go down, quit getting a stipend or whatever? But
And we're open to discuss that.
yeah, and it was just a point of curiosity, because if we, said, oh, it's only 4 or 5 people, then we'll set up a stipend process, and all of a sudden you got 45 applications, then we've just sold ourselves upriver in terms of what we can afford or not with that, but also wanting to recognize that there's a big level of heft in being able to work through and get that national board
Mhm.
certification.
Yeah.
So it's how do you reward it appropriately? Yeah, so that was all.
Okay.
The other note that I put in there, and Nicole and I have talked about, I want to make sure there's no other ones in here. Yeah, Nicole and I have talked about this a little bit before, is I would like to also take a look at studying movement on the salary schedule and types of credit. Simply because of, we now have, universities that, and I'm gonna get this wrong. Instead of a standard, you have registered for 12 credit hours. It's like you're here for a term, and if you get through 12, great. If you get through 15, that's great too. But you're not bound by the term and what you originally sign up for. I'm trying to think of who it is, which group. Anyway,
Western Governors University.
probably Western Governors, yep. There are also some things where, we've got some, university classes that are sold, if you will, to a university by a professional learning house that may be a work on your own time. They may or may not have a lot of, or any direct teacher input and direction and instruction. And the university's making money, it's less expensive credit. Do those have value? I think they do. But do they have value for credit hour or seat hour, or how do we make that determination? And I have to admit that my time in school has been a while. And so knowing that, I want to make sure that we're looking at the university setup of credit and things that make a difference for people in a way that will give me a way of thinking differently. Or not. Just to be able to have the dialogue as the university systems change. I don't want to stay stuck in the old guard. The other thing I want to do is to continue to be able to, because one of the things that a lot of districts have done is said, if you are going to get approved for movement on the salary schedule, you will take classes toward a next degree. We got some people that will say, I want to take this class and it has to do with, how do I work with autistic students in my classroom? It doesn't go toward any degree, but it makes all the difference in the world to a teacher who wants to be able to participate in that. And so, how do we work those things through and make sure that there's some consistency in how we make the decisions? And I just want information to be able to help us think about how we move into the changes in the college world and what's a seat hour versus what's a credit hour and how we talk about those kinds of things. So that's my notes.
Joe made a comment that when he was switching to another math class that, and it's not saying that doing a self-paced thing, you know, I'm gonna teach a new math class and I'm gonna go is all bad. But some of them do also, when we think about the shared value of what good instruction looks like and our teachers like feedback and working through it, some of the stuff out there is disappointing. It looks like safe schools. And like, and some of it, and so I think that was just to echo what Susan says. How do we make sure that like, do we have a process that says that we're gonna have things that match what we believe about good instruction?
I agree, there needs to be a conversation around it. I mean, I'm all for that, but I also, as many people in the room here know, the classes at the next level have changed drastically. And, as far as how it's presented, information online.
Yep.
And we are kind of stuck
Yeah,
and thinking what a traditional class looks like and that feedback when our learners are going off to the second level and our teachers are also participating in that second level.
totally.
And it looks different than what our traditional minds are
100%.
expecting of
I agree.
an education
Yeah.
class.
That's why I want to take a look at it because I
It's
don't want to cheat
unfortunate
people
in my
out.
opinion, because I can't even think of one member that would ever, one, pay for hours, but two, try to take something that they don't find value in.
Right.
I mean, they're not gonna waste their time, money, effort. They're educators.
And the question-
That they want to
Sorry.
educate themselves to further on, to
Yep.
pass that knowledge down. They're not doing pottery classes unless they're an art
Unless they're the art
teacher.
teacher, yes.
So I mean, I'm all for a conversation, but I also know that we also need to step into the area that we're sending our own students.
I agree.
And to deny that, that's where they're at, and we should understand that and embrace it ourselves.
Yeah, and part of that's credit hours versus seat hours versus whatever. I still think, I agree with you, what people come forward with and want to participate in, has value and has merit. And so, how do we walk into it, in that appropriate way?
And if it looks like a safe schools, then, I mean, some classes at a university level have that look to them. I'm not saying it's that.
Totally.
I'm just saying
yeah.
that they're earning credit that way, and I'm not, again, I'm.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
But,
Yeah.
I just know that our teachers, are not trying to take just a frivolous class too.
Oh, no, I've never gotten that. It's just what it how it counts. That's all.
I completed my master's online and not everything was, we had interaction with an instructor, but yeah, it wasn't your typical. What you're envisioning, it was online and there was conversation and maybe some meetings in person, but a lot of independent work. And I got my master's, so I
Yeah,
can't say that doesn't count. but
right, right.
definitely
But what you just described in terms of like, there was interaction, there are things that are like,
Yeah.
there's not interaction, it's isolated. And so I think we were just like, it's just like, I don't think that we've necessarily got it all sorted out. It's just the conversation of like, what do we believe good instruction looks like and that shared value. And I think that's, there's some great things and there are people selling bad products for hoop jumping just for that method. And I think that's.
I think it has value to ask the question too, if an accredited university is giving credits for it. Why wouldn't we?
I'm sorry.
If an accredited university is giving credits for a class, why wouldn't we?
Some of them that I've looked at, they say, please talk to your school or district about whether or not they will accept these credits as credits. And for some of them in an online world, which I get, a university wants to make money too. And so if I can buy a credit, but never have any teacher that I have to put in that position to be able to interact with students in an online something, then I just make money.
That's every university.
And I agree, Yeah, I know. So, but I mean, that's the part to calculate or that I want to figure out. Is what that looks like.
Part of my perspective on that is I also did my master's degree online, nothing in person. But is also protecting teachers from predatory practices like that. So if there was a way for a review to happen, when you submit that paperwork, these are the classes I want to take to make sure that it's not from somebody who's very clearly taking advantage. Not because I wouldn't trust your judgment, but because who has a ton of time to do all of that investigation every single time. So, because there have been universities that have gotten like, you know, your student loans have been forgiven because that was not a real
Well, I guess
thing.
that's the question I would have. Do you have the time to go through that? And
I know, and that's,
Right?
but that's
We
why,
don't
that's
have
why we were kind of like,
experts
how do
sitting
we,
around
how do we
ready to
determine?
Right, and for me also, it's a level of consistency because some things we've approved or somebody's come in and gotten credits from a certain situation counted. Well, so-and-so got it counted, so why doesn't mine count? And so then we get into this, I just want to get us to some common rhythm, whatever that rhythm is. I don't care what it is, but it's just, everybody understands, what happens. So that's all. Article 20, our conversation with Article 20 is, for the most part, they are very good and very heard process considerations. We do not consider them to be appropriate as part of a collective bargaining agreement. A collective bargaining agreement is an area where if something doesn't happen, then you can grieve or whatever, all these kinds of things. These are, like I said, very good, and we've already looked at the things that we are going to change to be able to take a look at the new teacher orientation. But do they belong in a collective bargaining agreement? We don't think so, in terms of how this plays out. We did put a couple of article notations, identification of observing personnel. If we were to put out right now the information about who will be conducting any formal or informal observations, you're gonna get the list of pretty much every administrator. And so, we want to be thoughtful in that way. So it's just information to be able to look at as good practice. The identification of your observing personnel, you could have a whole lot of people, in that role. So
So what stays, just so I'm clear, is it,
what stays for this would be the policy handbook and the CBA.
okay,
And that would, and association president and building representatives will also be provided with updated policies.
so F,
Yeah,
you know?
because a lot of it had to do with new teacher orientation, which I think is great. And it gives us the opportunity to be, I mean, it's kind of like, what's the difference between what goes in a CBA and whether or not something is heard? And that's a real struggle, but this is a piece where the process considerations are great and they are being considered. It's just, do they belong as a part of a collective bargaining agreement? So. Article 28, vacancies and transfers. We took out in talent ed, we could leave that in, but it was the same reason we put in a student information system, was something that's more generic. Our plan is to continue to do that as long as we have talent ed. But it was just, and I don't know what the verbiage is to be able to go in there, but and maybe we leave it talent ed, and if it changes, we change the verbiage in the contract. I don't know, but that was the reason for that. In the interview committee vacancies, we said filling licensed vacancies as a part of the hiring process. At least one representative of the licensed staff at the related grade or subject level of the vacancy shall be invited to volunteer to participate as a member of the interview committee. Interview committees shall be trained and shall provide a recommendation for hire to school and district administration. It's a management right that the interview team is not the hirer of staff. Licensed staff are not the hirers of licensed staff. And so when we looked at attempts to select a prospective licensed staff via consensus decision-making, what we do is we make our recommendation, or the committee makes their recommendations. And then you've got the option of, I mean, then you have all your reference calls and all those other things that follow up that may or may not give you additional information. And so it was really about the role of an interview committee is to make a recommendation. The role of the interview committee is not to hire. So that was the change there. School safety, again, more question, because we agree that there is stuff we need to do. The district will maintain a district-wide safety protocol, and this is why I put this with the classroom management and behavior as a look. Are we going to get into with a district-wide safety protocol? Misunderstanding about what that is. So somebody thinks that it's what happens if I need to have a lockdown at my school, where other people may think that it has to do with what happens if I've got a student that is dysregulated in my classroom, or is it both? And so it's really just a matter of making sure that from the get-go, we're doing a good job of being clear. There is agreement very definitely that this is the hot topic and a hot issue, and we need to be consistent and have that information. When it says the district will notify all staff annually of the district safety protocol, no argument whatsoever. It's just really what is that district-wide need to be a part of. And so that would be the reason for starting, but then being able to build also. Oh, and then in D, facility security access. All schools or facilities in the district will have lockable exterior doors. Licensed staff will be issued working keys to any doors they need to access in the course of their normal duties, and just left it at that. Without the specifics, to be able to do.
Susan,
Did I get them all? I
Yeah.
think.
I have some clarification on,
Yep.
on the formatting here, because there are areas in this proposal where you have the gray, which is.
The gray was
all
what you
previous.
put forward.
Sure, and I see that. I'm trying to make sure that we're clear on areas where it's just there as a reference, or is it there? So,
Anytime I put note, that's a point of reference. Anywhere else in the context of the agreement language, for instance, in the facility security access, that was all in gray. And I wanted to highlight those things that we said would or would not be there. Or that we were coming back to you with that adjustment. And I don't know what I need to do to be able to highlight, underline, or whatever to make it different.
okay.
So if you've got suggestions, I'm happy to take them.
So I'm just trying to, it's helpful to see that in the areas that, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on what is a proposal and what's just a reference. So in B, for example, and I'm not committing anything here, but if we were to come back to you and say that paragraph that you've written there, that includes our gray and the strike throughs with the highlights, would you accept that? If we said, we'll accept that, is that your proposal? Like? you
That
could
is our
live with that?
proposal, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then on the front page, you're not proposing to have our paragraph at the beginning.
That's what you put forward, and
That's our
because it's
proposal.
solely in gray,
Yeah.
we left it there.
And, okay,
And so anything that is in
So just
straight
leave
gray
that
with
struck
nothing,
out.
then there's no changes.
that we have no adjustment. The only difference would be around the special ed things while we talked to Kelsey. The other thing I did not come back with was the Article 32 about facilities, which was the new article that you proposed. Because one of the things that I'm doing right now is pricing what that would cost. If we were to be able to have all the drops and things like that that we need to be able to have all the things that are desired as a part of that technology proposal. So that's why you don't see that coming back, because I still have some work to do to be able to get some information.
Okay, back, staying on 31%.
Yep.
Just back to A on immediate threats, so there's gray and yellow in that paragraph there, so is that?
If a teacher believes that there is an immediate threat to a student, to student or teacher safety, and it said from a student or community member, we took out from a student or community
Not
member.
accepting that.
So if the teacher believes there is an immediate threat to student teacher safety, the teacher may request immediate assistance. So it's kind of like wherever it comes from. And then the gray was what you had proposed.
And so you were good with that
Yep.
gray there and there?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that helps, thanks.
Yeah, and if you have suggestions about how I can format to be able to make this easier to read, like I said, say the word, because I keep trying to guess.
Yeah, I think that right now, I mean, seeing it out, we can talk about that, but I think the main thing is making sure that we're clear on items that are with like, truly, you're like, we're responding back, and we could accept this and live with this language right now. Make sure that we understand that. Take a quick, maybe bathroom break before we change, give you our stuff.
That works.
10 minutes?
Yep.
Today was a day. Nothing but meetings from
I'm gonna get her, get back in.
10 o'clock this morning. I've talked for a while. I had 1.5 hour break all day. And that was it. Oh, and the whole 10 minutes later. Thank you.
We're back to live.
Okay. We're passing around two, packets, should take one of each one stapled and the other is, separate.
Okay.
One page. Okay. So our packet starts on the Article 1 status of agreement. And your proposal that you had given us back, you had I believe you called it a
Thank you.
discussion point on us representing temporary employees. And you have that in the exclusion area. Our proposal is to maintain the status quo in Article 1 and keep the language the same. We can
And
Speak to
our
that.
concern is, one is that it's pretty common for us to hire temporary employees. And, a lot of times, maybe we need to open a rec at a late notice or something has happened. And by far, these individuals are helping our district out. And so we want to provide as much support for them as possible. And then a lot of times it rolls into them then being hired on permanent employees. And so from day one, we want to offer support for those staff members that are in our district, no matter what position, but.
And I think I'm safe to say that we knew that was the possibility to come back around. And we put it in there as a proposal simply to encourage the conversation and dialogue. So I don't think you'll hear any argument.
Okay, one note that's not in here that we were looking through just now that. From our end, it looks like Article 2 could be included on a TA list as well, the management rights article. I
Yeah,
decided to open that one,
okay, thank you.
so that's a note.
I'll bring that when we get together next and we'll take care of that.
Okay, the next part of the proposal is in Article 6. You had proposed the striking of the calculation of net savings component for leave of absence, voluntary leave of absences that somebody might go on to save somebody else's job. We're fine with striking that it's not being utilized, and that can still happen. Someone could apply for that leave of absence, but that formula was important at one time and doesn't strike us as not being relevant anymore. So
Yeah,
we're-
in its time, it was important.
Yeah, we're good with taking that out. So on staff evaluations, on the change of status notification. And our feeling is we can make this consistent, like you were talking about, you had mentioned earlier about the evaluation handbook, but with current practice as well. Is if we just strike out who received a change of status notice and have the language just read, teachers shall have the right to representatives, their choice in any conference or
Okay.
meeting regarding their evaluation. You know, that is something that doesn't always go on, but we would be offering to our members, if they ask for support, and whether it was a probationary teacher in plan of assistance or otherwise, so. But that was our thought, to make it straightforward. Well, did you just, you made a couple of changes in your recent proposal. Did you do anything with Article 8?
Check here. I don't think so. Oh, it was just the notation.
Just that word change of status.
You just wanted to have an evaluation handbook, that you had your note in there, okay.
Yeah, that was always just to make sure that matched, but that was the only piece of language in there.
All right, so now we want to shift gears and go to the one page that's outside of the packet here, or I'm sorry, let's go to Article 11
Okay.
first, then we'll go to 12, sorry about that. 11, Article 11, we feel like we're close on the spirit here of this. We just changed the language slightly to receive, say paychecks will be issued to licensed staff members by direct deposit to the bank or credit union of the licensed staff members choosing. In the case of extenuating circumstances, a paper check will be issued. Your proposal said may. Our thought on this is that if there's
Oh, okay.
extenuating circumstances, you would issue.
We want to get paid.
Yeah, so, the difference there is may and will, that's our proposal.
Okay.
Okay. Now we're ready for 12. So. In this, article, there are a number of things that you have proposed that we are, rejecting. I'm gonna let the team get into that. There's two areas worth noting. We have in the actual proposal that we would propose back to the district. You have proposed under school workday that the sentence, the district association recognize that education involves professional obligations. We are fine with that statement. Everybody was like, kind of like, of course it does. And the other ones we're gonna get into, but I just
Okay.
want to point out before we get to that is that I think that we, got some clarification on your outdoor school proposal in that area. So I think that's an area that we need to go back and talk about, but I
Okay.
think that that is not an area of, that would immediately, struck the team as being something of objection. So I think that that is an area that we can talk through, but I'm gonna let the team start and give some responses on the first part of number B4. Letter B4 with the no staff or other required meetings held on the
Okay.
conference days. We're not proposing that.
I think it's really important, to keep the no staff and other required meetings, that's protected time. That's time that's set aside for conferences, for parents. We're trying to be available for their work schedule. It's critical, honestly, our sped teams get hit hard when that language is removed. And then they're not available for parents, conferences in that time. And so, and I also want to I guess just to clarify, I think it's come up a few times and maybe little comments here and there about conferences. All schools hold conferences, spring conferences, and I think there's been some misunderstanding as if that's not taking place. I know you have all your building admins on your team, so hopefully that's clarified that they are holding conferences.
Yeah,
and
that's-
each building is, and so I just want to make sure that publicly everybody understands conferences are being held.
I have no doubt
So-
that conferences in the
Okay.
fall and conferences in the
Perfect.
spring are happening.
Okay,
Been to conferences at every single one of
Yes.
these buildings on many, many,
Yes.
many occasions.
okay. I just wanted to make sure it was again stated that we are and for sure having them. I'll let other team members to speak on that.
Well, when you were talking about the proposal, last time we met, you said we've added that break time in between when school ends and conferences start. But that's still like teachers are eating their lunch, they're prepping for their conferences, so it's not really open time. And then I know, Steve mentioned that, okay, maybe the middle school had conferences on a different grading day. So they'd like to have meetings, but that's still a grading day and it should still be protected so that teachers can do what they need to do.
And I mean, in order to make it work with parents, I held conferences in between when school gets out and they technically start. I've been flexible and brought those meetings. And I'm already scheduling, 17, 20 meetings in a day. I don't think we need any more.
Okay. We have the unpaid evening activities proposal. We have a lot of discussion on this one.
Got a question about that one. What problem, Susan, are you trying to solve with the language that you were proposing here? I think we all have questions about what the exact problem might be. What are you wishing would happen? That is not currently happening.
I think for me, the concern is, I think there are some certain professional obligations and back to school open house is one of them. That I have continued to hear, not from everybody, but from people that said, well, you're not gonna pay me, so why do I have to show up to back to school open house. We want to do things like transition for students from, fifth to sixth grade and eighth to ninth grade. And there are sometimes when staff are desired to be there, to be able to help out with that transition. And so that was our attempt to be able to say, can we just land on? And we picked kind of 3 as the arbitrary, but can we land on just a couple of days that say, can you please give us back to school open house and probably the transition day, and there may not be a third. But it was a way of just being able to get it out there to say, these couple of things are really considered a professional courtesy. We know that if people are showing up for concerts, that there is a pay to that for people who choose that. So we know that there are some things that we will pay people for. The other side of that is if we are going beyond 3 evening somethings, shame on us.
So I hear 2 sticking points. I hear you saying back to school open house night, and I hear you saying transition nights.
Mhm.
But no other real sticking points for you.
But no, not for, but we haven't had, I mean, and we haven't had the conversation about what those evenings could be. But we all recognize that it could be 2. And that's
Well,
where,
that's a big
that's where it
difference for
lands.
everybody.
Okay,
So I would like us to identify where the problem lies, because if we're introducing new language that's in a collective bargaining agreement versus what we just work out in each site
Mhm.
with our building principals, maybe that would be a better, I mean, I can't imagine an open house night being a sticking point for many of us. I've never missed one. So, I mean, but. You wanna jump in?
is that in Article 12?
That is an
Okay.
article.
Yes.
I'm just looking for it to make myself a
Then
note.
C,
Thank you.
And so from what I'm understanding, it's the building principals have come back and said, we have staff that is not willing to participate in these after-school events, like to come to transition nights or come to gallery nights or something like that, or
And I think most people do. They have an interest in being able to come, but it has been, there have been some instances in both of those occasions that it's kind of like, oh, that darn district won't pay me and I have to come back on my own time. And it's not like we're asking for, I mean, conferences are a whole different gig. We've got a whole different setup for that. That I think has some value. And so it was just like, what are those just couple of things?
Do you think we can work with building principals outside of the bargaining agreement?
Let me ask them tomorrow.
Okay.
We talked about the outdoor school. We'll talk some more about that one and give you some feedback. Okay. Under Article 16, paid leaves. So there are a couple of sections here. And I'll go back and make mention of some of the other articles, like Article 15 as well, in a minute, but just to go through what we have here in this packet. So you had proposals to strike some of the incentive pay, which we have not included in here. You had a proposal to strike the sabbatical leave, which we're not including here. We did look at your proposal under D for the accumulated sick leave, and we incorporated that in a response that I think gets at the heart of what you were trying to drive at, which is that this is about the accumulated sick leave benefits that tier 1 or tier 2 retirees can use as one of their two formulas. If you just read the language directly, it might give somebody the impression that it has to happen all the time, and that's not what the law provides. It's essential from our end to make sure that it is articulated in the contract, because the district doesn't have to participate in it technically under the law. But there are provisions under the law to do it, and so we just put under Oregon law, kind of back to one of your previous proposals where you were striking actual statutes. We're comfortable with just saying the district will participate under Oregon law, and that participation will allow qualifying licensed employees. We updated the language
And I see you updated title.
to use 1/2 of their unused accumulated sick leave as a factor in their PERS or retirement or disability retirement pension formulas, meaning that, because it's full formula or money match, one of them you can use it, one of them you don't. And it's just important from our end that the district maintain its participation under the law. So I think we're probably in the same place here. We just took a stab at it and thought maybe we could make it more direct and not reference the statutes all the way.
Yeah, which is fine. We just wanted to make sure that people knew visibly that it was for tier 1 and tier 2 people, but there was never a question about
Yeah.
the continued participation.
Why can't I get that if I'm officer retiree? That makes sense. Okay. Incentives. I know one of the things I'll just mention, and then folks can jump in on that. We were kind of like, we heard concerns about people taking too much leave, and so we were like, why do we want to take the incentive away? I don't know, anybody else?
I mean, that was just really
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just seemed counter, of what one concerned about people taking excessive sick leave and the incentive. I know we discussed that and it. I don't think it's impacting a ton of staff members. I think from what I saw, it fluctuates from time to time with it.
And what we were looking at really was the amount of money it costs to administer it. Because the cost to administer it to, 10 people is the same as it would be for 30 people. And so the reason for raising it was really about, are we getting to a space where it's costing us more to implement a program than not? So that was the only reason for being able to lay it out there.
That helps with that clarification.
Yeah.
So you're talking about but staff, district office staff, time spent
Taking the
working
time.
on.
Time spent to
Yeah.
administer
Does Red Rover not spit out a report of,
Are you okay with Jennifer?
Not a great report.
Not a great use. And because the way we have personal leave and sick leave that come out of the same bucket. If you've only used personal leave, you don't qualify for the incentive, but the way we pull that information out of the system, it may not show as used under sick leave. It shows them as adjustment. So it gets, she almost has to touch every person
Yeah.
that doesn't have to go through everybody's list of sick.
Are we utilizing a Red Rover? Like we have all the bells and whistles that we can possibly access on it?
For for leave usage, I think so.
Okay,
There are some new programs that are coming out with that we're gonna look at.
okay.
one thing that we talked about as a team is Red Rover is not user friendly. It seems like it's not user friendly on either side of the program. So we were also wondering if this is a program issue.
When it comes to leave. Pay without leave,
leave without pay.
leave without pay, that was another, I know we haven't.
That's
talked about
Article
that.
17.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, we
we'll
can
get
talk-
there,
we can
but-
ask.
Yeah, but I think that if there are other ways that we can look at too, the notion of an incentive that has a easier bandwidth to implement. I agree, you want to encourage people for hanging on and doing what they need, or doing what we would hope they do. In terms of having this incentive for people who choose to stay during those times. So it's kind of like, what other way or what other process or protocol might work? So,
What I hear is that you're just spending a lot of hours going through those two systems and making them talk to each other.
That's not the whole issue with the sick leave incentive. We have that for 3 different employee groups and all 3 of them have different languages. Okay, so trying to implement the sick leave incentive is difficult. That's a lot of behind the scenes work. It probably takes maybe a full day to do that at the end of the year and make sure she captures everybody. It's all implemented differently. I think Red Rover and our accounting program talk to each other fine for this purpose. For sick leave incentive and use.
Okay, that was helpful. Thanks. Okay, so Article 17, a couple pages later. We moved some wording around here, but I think we have something that we're close on.
Okay.
This is related to licensed employee on extended unpaid leave shall notify the district of their intent to return from such leave no later than March 15th of the year prior to anticipated returns. From there, we just updated the next sentence, which wasn't part of the original proposal, uses the term teacher, and we've moved to licensed employee, and we just went to there, make the language consistent in that part, but, you know, that I think some of the distance you're using must, we're saying shall. I think that what we, and a little bit of it, some of that different.
No,
word,
I get it.
I think what we want to avoid here is some sort of interpretation, which would mean that like somebody didn't, you know, you resigned or something, which is, I mean, I think we would get into it, we would contest that if it came down to it.
I would
So it
hope you
become a
would.
legal issue that we don't want to have to go down that road on. I
Yeah.
think that we're comfortable with when someone is seeking a 1 or the 2-year unpaid leave of absence, which is one of the reasons why that's in there, although it hasn't happened, but like that's the length of a term if somebody was ever elected as a statewide officer to the OEA. This would be one of the pathways that would go through that. So maybe one of these great women here will be an OEA president one day down the road and do that. But so I could tell somebody, hey, we're granting you this, we don't have to. And part of it is you're gonna let us know by March 15th for staffing. And especially if we were in a place where we were cutting back or it was like that meant we're gonna have to, you know, tell somebody on a temporary contract they're not being rehired because we don't know what you're doing or something like that. So I think we believe that is fair on that. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's couldn't change later and be I mean, they're subject to the 60-day notice, but yeah, I'm going to return, but then, you know, spouse gets transferred or something like that.
Yeah.
They can't do that. So,
There's always stuff
yeah.
that can get in the way.
So should, in the same section, if we change teacher to licensed employee, do we need to change teaching positions? Are there people who are in non-teaching positions? Or is teaching positions still? And that's me really not, I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know,
It's primarily
we talk
teachers and
about,
counselors.
we talk about that and that, representation, you know, we go back, we've got the full and part-time licensed employees and the exclusion, you know, of that. We're trying to be, you know, we would usually use the term licensed teaching personnel because everybody, you know, even if somebody is a speech language pathologist, they're engaging in some sort of instruction or whatever.
Yeah.
I think when we get in a larger district, sometimes where you have things like full-time occupational therapists or things like that, that like I would assume Paloma would, if it needed, it would use through the ESD or something like that. That becomes a little different, but I think that, I mean, could be rehired at their position. I mean, it could be taken away, but I think that the part that is important when we go to licenses employees is to qualify that we mean everybody who's covered under the bargaining.
Absolutely.
Okay, short-term unpaid leave was in your proposals, and we have some questions and concerns around this area, so we don't have that in our proposal.
Okay.
This is the 2 weeks. So I can. So one of it was we heard about issues related to access to unpaid leave, and we weren't sure about whether this was a classified issue, equally a licensed issue that we're working on here. But that was one of the questions I wanted.
Yeah, we were just trying to, I think, and this is what I brought up earlier too, trying to figure out where the real issue lies. Is it a program issue? I know on our side, we struggle with Red Rover. Especially when it does let you do those, like take leave and whether or not you have leave available and everything. It's not the easiest to understand how much you have left. It makes it very confusing. And so I understand the district's concern around this. But I think that maybe there's a different way that we can look at it, or a different process that can be handled, especially when it regards, just like maybe notification in a different way. I don't think, I would hope not, and this might be just me being naive, but that staff is intending to take unpaid leave that's not, they haven't allocated for yet, but so that's been the concern, because I think it's more of what we've talked about is the challenges with Red Rover. And understanding what's still available to us to use.
Yeah, and as far as the proposal, I would hope that you would come back with something different, because that was kind of a, how can we throw something out there to talk about how
Yeah.
important it is?
Yeah,
But know that health insurance was not the answer and will never be the answer, of, what we had talked about in that. So, yeah,
Was this more of a license issue or a classified issue? Did you mention?
you
that,
asked
Catherine?
for,
I did.
and it's more of a classified issue than it is a licensed issue.
But not to say that it wasn't impacting the
Right.
license level, yeah.
But you're right, because then we have to take a look at in Red Rover, when you put in sick leave, sick leave automatically sends it out to look for a sub because you're sick.
Yeah.
If it's personal, it requires approval before it'll go out and start that search. And so, that's something that we've got to figure out how does that work to be able to figure it out? So, yeah, I'm hoping that there's some joint way of being able to take a look at that. Because I don't have the answer. But yeah, I hear it's hard to be able to, know what you've got in there and how.
I think you have to go to your last pay stub often and not rely on Red Rover. Many of us do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then even then it's questionable, because if you're mid-month and you don't remember what you did 2 weeks prior to that, it's tricky.
Well, like
To know
mine
how
was
much
like,
leave is actually in there.
mine was wiped out completely, so I had to go rebuild mine and then I had to verify. It just takes a lot of
It
time
does.
to, when those
Excuse me.
glitches occur. But yeah, we were just wondering if this is really a
We're all
Red
feeling the
Rover
same
issue
pain.
that could be something that could be tweaked, or something kind of like user, like turn on that possibility of it to track it better. or something.
Yeah, and that's certainly worth looking at.
There's something in Red Rover. I know how well Megan is going on one of the directs with me and uploading it back to Red Rover while we were using the ESD.
Yeah,
And we did have to do a correction on that, so.
it's tough, I think, on both sides, so I
Yeah.
think it's unfortunately not the best.
Software program.
It seems fitting that it's named after one of the more traumatizing playground games. Let's rename it Dodgeball. Yes.
this is an issue. I mean, I'm hearing about it a lot in the region, so it's not, and it's across the state.
Yep.
So it is a phenomenon, and I think that I think we should keep talking about it. I think one of the concerns with this proposal is that we don't want people to take unpaid leave.
No.
Like, that's not I think we have, we share that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are situations where someone is like, I'm gonna go on unpaid leave because I'm gonna go on parental leave or other, and they like, okay, we support that part of it, but this idea that you are frequently absent to the point where your 10 days have expired and you don't know, it, and you like, some of it, I have some hope that there is some education component to it, because people think, well, this can just go on, and I think, but the challenge is like, maybe years ago, you could have gone down a disciplinary route. But if you are suspending somebody that's are voluntarily taking a suspension already, like, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But I think that there's more education they can have with it, because people do this, but like, one of the problems comes with like, if you have with the proration of pay, people don't realize, oh, I'm going on an unpaid leave status, and then they return back to work and they want to know, why are my paychecks less than they were my 12th week checks or 10th week checks, whichever they're taking? It's like, well, because you were supposed to work 190 days and you didn't, and so that is being adjusted, and like, that becomes a learning thing about those ramifications. It impacts, a lot of that, and so I think that it's something that we want to work through. I think back to, and I think it's makes a lot of sense from our end to talk about if we've got some sort of incentive program that's also not working or causing workload, but like, that's probably more like the end that we start to go to, because there's like an education.
How do you
component.
focus on
I
the
think that there's a
positive
little bit, frankly, I think a little bit too much of like an ease around the use of paid leave Oregon in places too, where people are saying you can do that. And that it's not being used the same way that the old Oregon FMLA would have been used for, like, somebody that is dealing with a major health issue or wants to stay home with their kid. Instead of just being like, and I think the other part of it is if we do have somebody that's frequently missing time for some sort of other intermittent reason, that's good we want to talk to them and find out like what's happening there. They could be having a mental health issue. They could have lupus, where they're not out for 5 days counting for FMLA, but they have a flare up and they can't come in. Well, is that a reason for that? Like, that gets back to like, well, maybe that's somebody that we would want to donate to,
Absolutely.
but if it's like, I think that some of this stuff we're open to addressing on a problem solving basis on a
As
case
are we.
by case.
Yep.
It's like, hey, we've got a problem with this person. They're at risk of getting disciplinary action. We'd like to explore alternatives. We would rather have that conversation ahead of time.
Yep, works for me.
Okay. So that's our packet that's there. Just a couple of notes here. On 13, you gave us back some things in your most recent proposal. We didn't bring a response back on 13 because we had opened that article and had our thing in there. That's one that I think our team needs to reflect on.
Okay.
Some of the stuff that you've had in there and decide with that. So on Article 15, the supplemental plan. So a couple things with this. Because we haven't done changes to this article for a while, and one of them was subject to an arbitration case not too long ago. There's gonna be a little bit of reluctance diving in, even though it's clear that there will be people that phase out of this. So in your proposal, you had struck some things on that. I think that any conversation along that road would require maybe another meeting where we are going down the list, like who phased out, who's on Medicare now, or off of it, who's 67 years old, all that kind of stuff, to make sure that nothing was missed if we went down that road. But the one thing I wanted to be clear on, because we haven't adjusted this before, in your proposal, you had proposed $1,200 per month on the option A insurance to match the current contract language. Would it be your intention to go to the 1,300 that you just proposed? Are you just matching what it was or,
And actually, we hadn't talked about that part,
yeah,
as to what we would want to do. The idea was that it has been at $870 for forever.
yeah.
And, did we want to be able to move it into a more relevant space?
Yeah, and I think that that's helpful to be discussed a little bit more because, you know, we're not gonna be opposed to giving access to benefits, but part of what came back was the reason that that number is fixed there is the same reason why one of the main reasons why we went to the insurance pool to begin with,
Okay,
because the district didn't want to increase the cap. Because they didn't want to have further liability on these numbers in this article. So,
that's helpful to
and
know.
that was like, okay, we've kept this, that was why that was there, and then this is going way back. But one of the reasons why we would have said, okay, well then let's not raise the cap. Let's put more money in the pool. That was because of this trade-off with this issue,
Okay.
but it is one of the reasons why our cap became below average on the statewide, which you're recognizing our proposal on that. But these are all kind of linked back together, and so it's one of these things where it's surprising now. We're not trying to like just,
No,
let's
it's
talk
just,
through
this is,
this a
this is
little
good
bit more to make
information
sure
to
that
be able
we're
to
all-
have some history.
we're all understanding on that one, so, yeah, I think that's it. I think
Okay.
that Article
Yeah, we can
two
look at
maybe
that.
might be able to be TA'd on the agenda, and we can look
Yeah.
at the other, double check on 26 on the classroom enrollment. And we'll-
Yeah, because I've got 26 pulled out here and, I'll pull up Article 2 because we can do that.
I think it would be kind of worth it to do, if you're open to it, what we did last time, because it's 6:10 right now. I mean, if you want to, we could go in caucus and give you some official articles to respond to, but I think it would be better use of our time to be able to go and talk now so that we can work and then give you a heads up of the articles that we can bring proposals back to in addition to those. I think 13 is on I think it's gonna be core to like some of the ones that you brought back some changes in your proposal too on articles that we already had open, would
Yep.
be one of those in there, and then you've given responses on some compensation, some other things that we need to talk about too.
Yeah, and we have to come back with a little bit more detail on the special ed specific additions and your new Article 32 specifically, to be able to do that.
That's
My
a good
question
idea.
would be, what about May 20th before we disappear? Is that even a remote possibility? Or not at this late date? Or would you rather just wait till the 28th?
How about we go and talk about that one and give you an answer?
Okay,
That work?
and yeah, that works for me and,
Can we
I-
respond with an email? with
yeah,
the
I would say
answers?
email or
Okay.
something like that would be just fine,
Okay,
to be able to do that. It just when that budget committee meeting, came up as not needing to happen, it was kind of like, do you
Yeah.
want the other day at this late date? And if you don't, that's okay. It was just kind of like, let's offer up a possibility.
Yeah.
so we'll let you know by tomorrow.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Can I offer a suggestion of wanting to sit and look at what we have for data, the supplemental retirement program, just to see who is still in the system and who's coming out.
Yes,
Yeah, I can find time to do that. Okay. Thank you.
Jennifer's your person.
okay. Let's put that
Thank you
down. We'll
for offering that.
appreciate that. Yeah, let's, we'll work to schedule that maybe during the day, if not, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be hard after work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And appreciate getting some of the ones that we have off the table and, very cool. Thank you. Mark, do you have a space where we can just powwow for
Is that all?
5 minutes?